And there the final panelist is arriving just in time. Dear friends, distinguished guests, fellow storytellers, my name is Kjersti Moe, and I am the CEO of the Norwegian Film Institute, and I'm also the current chair of the 5 Nordics, a strong and happy collaboration between the National Film Institutes of Norway, Sweden, Denmark, Iceland, and Finland. And it is a true honor to welcome you to this conversation about the power of film and its role in safeguarding democracy and freedom of expression. So on behalf of my Nordic colleagues, all present here, thank you for joining us to explore one of the most urgent questions of our time. What role can cinema play in defending democracy in an age of polarization and disinformation? We live in a world where truth is contested, voices are silenced, and the very foundations of democratic societies are being tested. And yet, we also live in a world where stories, when told with courage and clarity, can cut through the noise, build bridges, and ignite change. Cinema is not just entertainment. It is a mirror that reflects who we are. It's a megaphone for voices too often unheard, and it's a meeting place where empathy is born. Through film, we are invited to see the world through the eyes of others. We are challenged to confront uncomfortable truths. And time and again, cinema proves its unique power to transcend boundaries and making us recognize ourselves in each other's. In the Nordic countries, we have long believed in the power of culture to shape society. Our films reflect our core values: freedom of expression, diversity, equality, openness, and trust. But these values are not a given. They must be protected, nurtured, and reimagined by every new generation. So today we gather voices from politics and culture and civil society to ask, how can film dialogue foster dialogue in divided times? How can it strengthen democratic resilience? And how can we, as cultural leaders, ensure that the screen remains a space for truth, empathy, and hope? The stories we choose to tell matters. So let this be more than just a panel. Let it be a call to action, because democracy needs defenders, and storytellers are among its most powerful allies. So thank you all for being here and for joining us in this strategic act of defense. To moderate this exquisite panel, I want to introduce Rebecca Leffler, who is an American journalist and author based in Paris, where she is currently a correspondent for Screen International. And previously she has worked for Hollywood Reporter and Canal Plus, and she is also known for moderating very interesting panels like this. So welcome, Rebecca. The stage is yours.
Merci. Well, this is definitely going to be an interesting panel, I can promise that, because we have assembled an A-list cast for it. Can everyone come on stage, please? Intimate. So first of all, I think, can everyone just introduce yourselves, tell us who you are, what you do, and perhaps why you're here in Cannes this year. You want to start?
I was late, so I have to start. I'm really sorry, by the way. It's never pleasant to have someone arriving late. My apologies for that. I'm Pauline Duranvial. I work for the Federation of European Screen Directors, which is an umbrella organization based in Brussels, representing a professional organization of filmmakers. And we do both lobbying towards European institutions to ensure that legislation and support programs are developing to the best of the interest of our people, as well as doing some networking and understanding what the challenges of the craft and the professions are at the moment in Europe. And just maybe one thing, we try and understand the market as much as possible, because we don't believe that advocating with only the benefit of our people in mind will be very sustainable for the industry. So we try and adjust what we want to see achieved based on a balance for an independent ecosystem locally to make sure that diverse storytelling can emerge.
Okay. And
I'm Lisa Dreyer. I'm based in Austin, Texas. I am the festival director of Fantastic Fest. We are the largest genre festival in the United States. And yeah, we're here looking for great films to bring back to the United States.
Hi, my name is Jean-Christophe Simon. I'm the founder of a sales company called Films Boutique in Berlin, and as well a production company called Parallel 45 in France. Recently, we worked with Mohamed Rasoulov that we produced with the film The Seed of the Sacred Fig that premiered here last year. We worked as well with Agnieszka Holland with Green Border, which might be a topic we'll discuss today. And in the festival, we present the film The President's Cake, film from Iraq at the Director's Fortnight, and we are a small producer on Tariq Saleh, a film in competition, Eagles of the Republic.
My name is Tina Fischer. I'm the CEO of the Danish Film Institute, and I'm here, well, to promote Danish cinema, but also to talk profoundly with my European colleagues running the film funds across this continent, strengthening European collaboration, protecting cinema as artistic freedom, and I guess also strengthening an infrastructure in Europe that maybe has been too slow in coming together.
Hello, my name is Didar Demery. I'm a producer based in France. My company is called Nordic Film. I have produced around 25 features. Half of them are with foreign directors from all over the world. This year in Cannes, I have a film called Promise the Sky by Erich Zehiri, the French-Tunisian director that opened Un Certain Regard. And I'm the French co-producer of the Linur Palmason film, The Love That Remains, that is in Cannes Premiere. And I'm very happy to be here to talk about democracy this morning.
Hey everyone, my name is Ali Abbasi. I'm a filmmaker, and I'm here because I can. You know.
And he had a film that premiered in competition here last year.
Yeah.
Just a little movie, Oscar nominated, you might have heard of. So yeah, we're modest here. So since we are going to be speaking about democracy, I don't know who wants to begin, but how would you define, what is democracy? How would you define democracy? Anyone want, would you like to begin? Alphabetical order?
Yeah. I think everyone probably agrees it's not one thing, you know, and you know, I think Russians think it's a democratic country as well as Iran, as well as US, as well as Denmark, you know, but different tweaks in democracy. For me, is sort of a statistical model, you know, of saying that, you know, as long as you don't have the minority get hurt, you give the majority, you know, sort of deciding rights to, you know, decide on matters, roughly say.
Anyone else?
I mean, I guess that's a huge question, but let's say at least three things. For me, at least, free and fair elections, institutional coverage of artistic freedom, institutional coverage of media freedom. Because when you touch artistic freedom and access to free press, then you basically crumble democracy.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else want to weigh in on democracy?
It's a bit far away, but as far as I can recall from my whole studies, democracy, it was supposed to be demos kratos, which means roughly power to the people. And we are experiencing the fact that power to the people is maybe right now what is challenging sometimes the world we live in. So that's why it's not so easy to define what is democracy, but I think the fact that we can try to speak and to tell stories, at least for us, storytellers, it's really about the center, what can we say and what can we not say.
Yeah, and I can also add to, in the context of the audiovisual European field, actually in our industry, that is a bit threatened at the moment. That's why also I think that this kind of panel is very important, is that the ability for all of us and all European countries and the rest of the world, of course, to be able to tell our stories. Mm-hmm. And us as producers to still be able actually to champion those directors and to protect their freedom of speech and their ability to tell those very specific stories that are more than just film and our economy, but also the vision of our world, our society that is changing. And it's very important. I think that Cannes is the festival where those films are being in the spotlight and really, can change our vision of the world. But we, as producers, without the politics, we can't do anything.
But do you feel that you're still able to make these films? Are they being challenged? You both kind of alluded to the fact, of the certain more right-wing governments emerging in Europe, and I know you can speak about, Green Border, for example. We know this happens in Iran, the seed of the sacred fig, and we can get into that. The story of the making of the film is so incredible. But, we heard about it, and we're not surprised. Iranian filmmakers have faced challenges, but we're seeing this perhaps, I don't know if you want to speak to what happened with The Apprentice and in the US, and in terms of making the film, finding a distributor, and also programming it and behind the scenes and what went on there. Was it a tough film to finance and distribute?
Yeah, but I want to just go a little bit back because, I can't, I love to be here. I love you guys. There's a lot of love, but you cannot escape the fact that, filmmaking, and especially the kind of filmmaking here, is essentially an elitist endeavor. And here we're sitting talking about democracy. For people, democratically, we would probably not be here. If the French people would have a say, they would probably want to see, those comedies with all those, close-ups on wine and cheese and, If the Danes, would have to say, they would just keep doing their, Second World War, hero movies. You know what I mean? That is democracy, actually. And the fact that as someone who invested a lot of time in sort of useless knowledge of getting to know Donald Trump personally, his win was a democratic win. And I think you have to sort of come to terms with that because, you can't just love democracy when it works for us and our values, and you have to acknowledge that, sometimes, because the whole, at least in Europe, the whole sort of cultural framework after the Second World War was not built on democracy, it was built on let's make sure we don't burn people again, in concentration camps, so let's educate people. It was a really elitistic project from top down. So there is that conflict at the core of what we're talking about,
I think the fear is that the people in power within, you mentioned, going back to World War II, and even we're seeing this now in America, and you brought it up too, the media and controlling the press and controlling culture. I think that is what is perhaps being challenged. I don't know, maybe you want to speak about what's happening within the Nordic countries and your country in terms of, is there a separation of church and state? Because, in America, this is the first time there's even a thought about how a government might be able to influence what people are seeing in the movies and things like that. Can you speak?
That's not true. That's not true. We've had all sorts of things going back to 20s and 30s and 40s and 50s.
Recently, yeah.
Yeah, but,
I would follow Ali on the fact that the American soft power was not a neutral approach to audiovisual films and works in general. So I think the notion of artistic freedom and how it articulates to what we would like to consider well-functioning liberal democracies is maybe what this is about, really, more than democracy itself, because, of course, democratic elections may lead to illiberal regimes to be set into motion. So the question is really what is the right environment for artistic freedom to thrive, and what is it that we all need, both in the market and in the political context, for that to happen, for filmmakers to be able to lift off storytelling that can be both pleasing and challenging to the audiences out there. I guess that's what's at stake, maybe.
So what do you, from each of your different places of where you're working, what do you need? Who do you need it from? Do you need permission? Do you need funding? Do you need laws? Do you need, what do you need in order for this to happen?
Well, we basically need all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Because we absolutely need, the public system to keep on actually funding us for those very specific stories, to help us as producers actually to still develop, acquire those rights, and to produce these films, to help these directors to have very, very specific storytelling that are challenging sometimes. And also specifically in France, I think that we are a country where we can really help a lot of directors from other countries where it's very difficult and where they are really threatened when they're trying to tell those very specific stories. I have done film in, different countries where censorship was the real issue to make this film happen, and I think having France as a partner can really help. So me as a French producer and as a European producer, I'm very, very also, grateful that the European ecosystem is actually also helping us on positive discrimination quotas to help us to impose, those stories and having quotas for those films. And at the moment, we're quite threatened by this. All these European politics that have been helping us to make these films happen these last years are really threatened. And I think that here all the European kind of signed a chart 2 days ago to enforce all these regulations that we all need as producers and talent in Europe and the rest of the world. Maybe you can even tell more about it.
You made a good point about that if it really were democracy and the audiences were speaking, I mean, these aren't always films that make a lot of money at the box office, and that are, if you asked audiences what they want to see, it's probably Mission Impossible and not necessarily a film that's defending democracy. So that's a great point, but yeah.
I mean, I think what we're kind of dancing around is that Trump was democratically elected, of course. Democracy is the right to elect an idiot if the most people want to do it. But what he's doing with that power, democracy is also about hearing everyone's voice, not just the majority. And so we're now seeing, in recent times, the first time that there's tons of cuts to National Endowment for the Arts. We're seeing tons of smaller film festivals that really champion diverse voices. They're losing all their funding. It's a type of, we're just seeing basically art is not going to be able to be made because certain people don't want to fund that art. And it's a very scary time, I think, in America. We're kind of, happy idiots. We haven't had to deal with this for
That's
a
what
while.
I meant. It's in recent history.
So, for us, it's extremely scary, and as a film festival, we program around 80% foreign language films, programmed all of your films, and now I'm having filmmakers say, I'm scared to come to your country, I don't know if I'm going to be detained. It's just issues that I personally I've been blessed to not have to think about them, so.
I think these are all really valid points, but I think our problem is bigger than that. Like last year I was here and with The Apprentice, the movie about young Donald Trump, among other things. And when the movie was finished, I was talking to people and I was saying, I think there's a wave of fascism and blah blah, and it really came like a week after. It didn't really, the ink wasn't even dry yet. And I think what we need to think about, all of us, is the other side. I'm hoping that we're not fascists. I'm counting we're not, people here. The other side has really clearly proposed a program in details on economical level, on social level, on cultural level, and part of the reason that they've been able to do that and been so successful is because our side also been a little bit full of shit. We've been doing, contradictory stuff. We've been saying, I don't know, just a very little example of it going on nowadays. Let's prioritize one conflict when one part of people are suffering in Ukraine. Let's not talk about the other people suffering in Gaza, or the third, or the fourth, or Somalia, you know what I mean? And I think when we have not been able to, you see that very clearly with Democrats, you know, in the election, they can blame it on everything, but seeing it from a neutral perspective, one thing you can see is like who do you want to believe in? Like the woman who's dancing with Beyonce, or like the person in a wheelchair, or like, you know, like what is the core of it, versus someone like Donald Trump, who has been saying something for same thing for half a century. It might be dumb, it might be, you know, and people are funny enough blaming him, afraid of that he's going to do what he said he's going to do. He said it for fucking 50 years. So he's going to do it, yes. And I think, yes, all these things are super important, but we really need to ask ourselves, who do we want to be, and what is our side? Like, how can we, in the same clear way, formulate a program, an ideology on social, political, cultural level that is relevant to now? Because the other side has done it. The ball is actually in our court now.
Well, so isn't the answer to that to have a diversity of perspectives and a diversity of voices? And so I think the question is, how do you ensure that, so it's not just one perspective, one voice, one, you know, place? Do you want to speak to that?
I think that, I mean, I completely agree, Ali. But I think that the crisis of democracy right now is a two-headed person, because one thing is the rise of autocratic political figures, system, entire societies, and another thing is how society then reacts to that. And it's like pre-fascism. It's how do you, as an institution, react when someone is turning off the DEI button somewhere in the system? How do you, as a filmmaker, react? And what I'm most afraid of is basically the soft, self-censoring mechanism that starts. That you start not applying with projects that are too radical, because you know it's going to hard to get those, maybe not you, but lots of other filmmakers would. And I mean, if you go to a historian like Timothy Snyder, or this is basically the core of what he speaks about when he speaks about tyranny, and how civic responsibility and institutional responsibility is at the core of this. That every day, freedom is not just a principle. Freedom is an act every day on an institutional level as well. And I think, at least for public film funds in Europe right now, this is the main question, because self-censorship in the US now is massive. And how is that? Because what happens in the US reflects also what's happening here. So all the companies in Denmark that 1 year ago had very strong diversity programs, none of them have them any longer. So it's a soft way of actually,
But also the US is actually threatening the Europeans, saying that if they're not stopping with the diversity program, they'll not work with them anymore. I mean, they have received letters. So this is really
and it's not only about DEI programs, it's just the very concrete examples. I mean, but I think the soft self-censorship is actually the worst. And we all know it, also the ones of us who have institutional responsibilities, as I have.
Yeah.
If I might speak from maybe a different perspective, I will speak here as a film distributor. We have been distributing films and always being on the side of artists. So actually, strangely, we are doing films, political films, but always from the artistic side, trying to support people who have a vision. The reality is that our world is shrinking. And in a very funny way, of course, we have different voices, different films, but we are doing, let me say, the same for the last 15 years. And the reality is that we became political activists on the way without willing it. And and Ali can speak better than anyone here, because he's having problems with the two biggest groups in the world. So I'm not sure where you will end up. But I will just quote Mohammad Rasulov, who was saying it's interesting because I'm just an artist who wants to make films, but every time you make films in Iran, you become a political activist because politics is everywhere. And I think I'm not sure it's the world issue is the right term, but that's what we face. with the same movies, now we start to have threats, which was not the same a few years ago. When we work with Mohammed, I mean, Iran is a one of a kind, if I might say, because you have this long tradition of putting artists in prison. But for me, the most shocking experience I was mentioning was Agnieszka Holland with Green Border, because Green Border was a massive threat of the far right. It's the only time we had to close all kind of social media of my company, because I was saying, but in one night after the premiere in Venice, we had 12,000 people voting on IMDb, and the film came with 1 star. So it means you have 12,000 people in front of you, and we started to have hundreds and hundreds and thousands of comments and things. So you try to be clever and moderate, and very soon you say, but we are not shaped for that. Green Border, as some of you might recall, that's where democracy is back. The film got the light. And so you end up with a film which is roughly making 900,000 admissions, which is a film about refugees, black and white in Poland, and they lost the elections. So you have to be a little careful as well as politicians, the way you handle this kind of situation.
Yeah, that's happening in France too. I mean, we've had, and that's where the media also is very important. They've had this issue with, Allociné, with certain right-wing media and right-wing groups, and they've commented on social media, on the different platforms, and whenever there's a film that's, deemed kind of, even before seeing the film, even before knowing nothing about it, but, oh, it's about police violence, or, oh, it's a liberal film, and so there's attacks on it, and it is threatened. So I guess, you've answered this question. It has to be already that on different levels, I think, and because it's trickle down, it ends up being it's the artist, the last step, and that would be the most sad thing is when the artist doesn't want to make the film because they can't get funding. They can't get funding because there won't be a distributor that will release it. They can't, and no one can sell it internationally. So what have you what experiences have you had, today that have been good examples, I guess, of being able to certain funds, I don't know if you've access as a producers, European funds that have been helpful that maybe others can lean on, co-productions, do you want to speak to that perhaps?
I think you've I think you've touched to the two key things that are always available when you find yourself under pressure. From within our membership, we can see when a country starts to become difficult in terms of environment to produce, which has happened in Europe several times now over the last 10 years. What saves people in lifting off the stories off the ground is co-production, independent producers in neighboring countries, and authors' rights, retaining some level of control on the work that is being done. So from the collective perspective in our organizations, these are the three elements that we feel must be upheld in every single context it can be. Because we know public funding, unfortunately, when an executive power decides to shift from supporting culture to something that is closer to propaganda, cultural identity being represented on screen, then the freedom of telling the story you want to tell it is definitely not there anymore. So this network of co-productions through independent producers who do have the ability to raise funding has been really essential, next to authors' rights and the ability to gain control of things. I know it's a bit technical, but from our perspective in Brussels, when we work on what exists in terms of regulation, these are things that are not going to possibly stay on forever. There are temptations for other reasons that are linked to market changes, innovations, to sometimes degrade a little bit the standards around these three pillars, and we want to hold firm in ensuring that these pillars are not jeopardized within the European Union community for these reasons, because we feel like they are the right elements to help you push forward in a context that is difficult domestically.
And the political context is always going to change, and so if we continue to live in a democracy, so depending on who is in power, I know how it works. I mean, I don't know if you want to talk about France and the CNC, but the idea of separating can you talk about in the Nordic countries, is that separate? How do you protect that? So if someone comes into power and they don't want to fund that, are you independent? Are you separate? Do you work together between you 5 Nordics, or is it very much country by country?
Yes, I think, I mean, the Nordic model, when it comes to cultural policy, is basically that the arm's length principle is the most important, which means that you would have a minister and a minister of culture, and then you would hand over the responsibility of funding, running institutions, and there would be an arm's length principle. And that is, I mean, you have to look at, as somebody being in charge of an institution, you have to really insist on it all the time and look carefully at it. Because, I mean, democracy is not destroyed in a day. It's not like somebody throws a bomb and then democracy starts happening. It's little by little by little. So that arm's length principle, I think, I mean, we all share it in the Nordics, and I mean, we are so extremely privileged. I mean, I feel almost privileged to sit here, but still, it is something to really look after all the time.
No, and I think this is very important also to act, you know, of course, as a human being, as professionals, as an industry, as Europeans, and to be in a collective movement altogether. So it's very, very important, I think, for all of us to be in our unions, trying to regroup as much as we can, and try to protect what we have been building in Europe, you know, these last years, because everything is quite threatened at the moment. And yeah, in France, actually, of course, yes, if the president change, he's nominating the head of CNC, and he can have huge consequences on the way that we produce film, how we are funded, you know, and of course, the key is to be able to still develop these films. If we don't have enough money to keep those rights, to develop those directors with those bold, you know, diverse stories, you know.
And I mean, that is different in the Nordics. I mean, at least in Denmark, it's not the minister who appointed me, it's an independent board.
So that's something that I think even other countries can learn from. And I think that in the US, maybe you can most speak to this, it's less, I mean, the benefit of Europe is that there is a European Union, there are, you know, the media program, there are supports, whereas in the US it is very much, I would say independent, but also there's studios, it's not as regrouped as it is in other places. Do you think that plays into it?
I mean, I think in the US it's all about money. So, and you know, The Apprentice, I don't want to speak about your film, but when I saw it in Cannes, I thought, wow, amazing film. What's scarier than this movie? It's perfect for a genre film festival. And I have a lot of friends that are distributors. They all love the film as well. It's like, well, you're going to put an offer on it, you know, like, let me know, we want to play it. They were all very scared to put an offer on it. I said, oh, man up, I don't know what to say. And then thankfully a distributor did step up. And, you know, when they called me to play the film, it was very hush-hush. We did a secret screening of it, so we didn't announce that we were going to play it before. We're based in Texas, so, you know, a lot of conservatives. But it played, you know, to an amazing response, and people loved the film. It's a fantastic film, and I just think the self-censorship thing is really sad. And it's about money, but it's also just about the money you could make in the future. And I don't know. If we're in the arts, I just think it's
also
disgusting.
about mentality, isn't it? You know, I remember I was at this diversity conference or whatever, and all the studios were, you know, represented. And you know, I work with these people. It's not like I hate them or anything, but I also know they would never, ever, ever touch a truly political movie. You know, they would go and like to the lengths to put like a black person in a wheelchair movie, you know, just to have that in their catalog, you know, and as they're doing everything else. And this was, of course, until 2 years ago. Now it's going to change, go to the other way, because, you know, essentially, I think I think what I'm trying to say, if I want to be a bit more educated, there is a part of this debate that is missing, which is the part of power that has migrated from both governments and the market to tech. You know, it has done it in the public space. It has done it in the public debate. You know, like I saw, again, because of my unhealthy interest, I was following the elections, I saw how big a deal it was when Elon decided to back Donald Trump, and then X became a backer of Donald Trump, and the algorithm favored that. It was a huge thing, you know? So it wasn't, you know, when we're talking also about democracy and everything, that's why I think I started saying it's a statistical model. I don't necessarily think what it has inherent value, but I don't think that inherent value is written in stone. You know, when you can manipulate people, you might be able to get the stuff you want out of the ballot box. You know, if you look at the way all these platforms are run. I mean, last time I was in Los Angeles, someone was joking with me. It was like, this used to be rock and roll, and this used to be, you know, Showtime, show business. Now it's a tech city, you know, and why on earth, if I was Netflix, why on earth I want to have something that's problematic on my platform where I have 20,000 other interesting stuff, you know, about all the other problems in the world where I'm not being sued, you know? So you see that, and also even, you know, I don't know, you remember this, we have this like tabloid in Denmark called Ekstrabladet, and they have a tradition, which is a Danish tradition. On page 9, there's always a naked girl. It's like a, you know, it's like a pin-up girl, right? And this is page 9 Ekstrabladet, and you know, these like 19-year-old girls, it's for some, it's an honor to be there. It's like launches their career, whatever. It's a sort of political incorrect thing I sort of hate and love with Denmark, but you have it. It's part of the culture. Then Ekstrabladet, the only people who had twisted their arm and they took it out, it was actually Apple. Apple said, if you have page 9, it's nudity, we don't do nudity, you know? Just take it out. You know what I mean? It's on that level. It's not on the human, it's not on the society, it's not on the government level, it's on the level of corporations that has no oversight, nobody has power over, and it's completely non-transparent.
I think that's very interesting also. Oh, you wanted to speak? Go ahead. But what you're saying is very interesting in the fact that in Europe, what we're fighting for, and in the contrast of what you were saying, where in the US everything is about money, we have created something that is called cultural exception, you know, that we are trying to protect and defend. And that's why also we are defending each European countries to be able actually to regulate, you know, his industry with our needs and our regulation, to not being in this global situation, to have the regulation by the American imposed to us. Goes also the AI revolution at the moment, you know, with all the software doing the data mining, and in the contrast in Europe when we are all defending the author rights so strongly, which is super different from the American copyright, and we need to be strong on those and to be very careful. It's what's happening. Not that we're against AI, on the contrary, I think that it's a tsunami happening, but we need to keep on regulating the way we did so far to protect our, you know, writers and authors and directors. This is super important.
Do you want to add?
I wanted to speak 1 second about censorship, because it's of course a topic we have been dealing with forever, so it's not new. And by the way, censorship, as you were mentioning, it has different level of intensity. You do have censorship in France on different topics that you have in the US. I'm always giving the example, sorry, because now you will fact check, and maybe what I will say is not totally accurate, but as far as I can recall, Amélie Poulain was prohibited below 18, I think, in the US, which for a French citizen was crazy. And on the other side, we never had the film by Trauma on French TV because the French people cannot see the blood and the guts on TV. So it's never where you expect. And in Iran, we used to sell a film to Iran, and it was films which were very challenging topic-wise, but they were covering with the kind of paint things, the shoulders of the women. So it's everywhere. The thing which is a little scary about, about censorship nowadays and platforms, it sometimes is because you don't have any human beings. I'm not saying that you can access human beings for other censorship, but you can negotiate. Filmmakers in Iran go to the government, negotiate as far as they can go, and that's how you make movies. Sometimes we can be even provocating, made in Iran. You have this situation. We had a case 10 years ago with a film by Peter Greenaway about Eisenstein. As far as I can recall, the film was not in iTunes in the US because it was not fulfilling the iTunes requirement. Yeah. No idea why. I mean, you had a sex scene probably, and the film was never on iTunes. You could not see it on video on demand in the US. So, and it's Peter Greenaway. So it's, of course, he's a provocator, but it's not an activist that would challenge the US democracy. So that's really a topic every day.
But it's an interesting debate. You were mentioning, you know, for example, the platforms and the streamers would say, oh, but we're democratizing, using this word. What you mentioned is quite often, you know, elitist cinema. And you can have a film that plays in Cannes and people can see it all over the world if it's streaming on Netflix. So the line is very thin between both sides, I think.
It seems to me like this touches to the other side of this equation, because we, especially from a European perspective, we tend to talk a lot about the freedom to, you know, write, shoot, tell stories for the screen, blah, 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 produce them. But then there is access to the audience, to get to your point. And this is where everything has changed and is now going to change even further, because now, since streaming rose, I think we could all see that the connection with the audience was slowly degrading. From my membership, I understand that there is little to no understanding about the interaction between the viewership of these platforms and the films produced, because there is a lot of opacity on the numbers of viewers, revenues generated is even another conversation. But there is something about more access, more works made available to wider audiences, but curation completely opaque or inexistent. We don't know how the algorithms are based, but we can imagine a little bit about what the engagement level subscription platforms desire from subscribers and how they want to acquire new ones. So if you look at this tendency on access to the audiences by platforms who are more and more powerful, what is going to happen with AI? There is a scenario where AI technology can be used in specific tools that are useful to everyone, and in a way it's a technological dream. But there is also another part of that equation, which is about using data-driven editorial logics that are going to lead to less and less interest for storytelling, more and more interest to content that is tailored to the known taste of the audience. Not just AI-generated content, but also flexible narrative formats adapted to the behavior of streaming platforms' interaction with content before. So this is the end of Final Cut. This is the end of filmmakers' control over the story they want to tell. It's an experience, not a story. And what happens when stories are less and less engaging, when you have global entertainment companies who are, you know, probably very logically going to look at that more and more. I think if we want to really talk about the future of democracy, I don't know, but artistic freedom, we need to take a harsh look at what could happen in the next 15 years, what we see, what type of patents are being filed by global companies dealing with our sector and producing content within this sector, works and other types of contents, to understand where this market-driven logic is going to lead us, because today in Europe we have, you know, funding, regulation that to some extent mitigate this. But the real truth is that our market is, you know, what is the percentage of American films driving audiences in cinemas in Europe? In the best of years, 70%? I mean, this is full-on domination. So you know where the influence in terms of interactions to audiences is going to come from. And I think this is where we need to keep our eye very vigilantly focused.
And can I just ask, what would be your solution?
You know, you see these trends emerging day by day, so it's very challenging to think about, but clearly the usual pillars seem to work. So even if they can be shaken up, public funding is helpful. public funding that also has serious thinking beyond production about distribution in interaction with audiences, obviously, and the key fundamentals in the legal premises of authors' rights, independent production, control of intellectual property, but remembering that the more we ensure, legally speaking, that these things can happen, there might still not be appetite in the market for it. So we need to think about how to make that also viable economically. And frankly, I'm little old me, I have no solution. But we do try and identify trends and think about where we could move in the next 5 years, which would be helpful.
And look at what happened after COVID. You know, the countries that helped their producers and distributors to maintain their activities after such a big crisis. And when you see in France how much the audience got back in the theaters and how much our independent, distributors are powerful, it's still very, very difficult. But we need, the public funding to help the distributors and the independent producers to still coexist with the platforms and, all the bigger companies. Following that logic, this is the huge threat, definitely.
If I can give a very recent example we worked with, the biggest threat on the film European democracy recently was the fact to try to get rid of geo-blocking. And it's very interesting because from a European perspective, as a politician, you have the feeling that if you break the geo-blocking, all Europeans can watch all European content at the same time. It looks great. It's a great program. The reality, if you do that, is that you destroy the cinema industry and the audiovisual industry in 70% of these countries, so you will all see if great French, German, maybe Italian, and maybe Nordics can still find their space. But clearly, nobody has an interest economically to have a film coming from North Macedonia, from Hungary, from Czech Republic, and so on. So that's why geo-blocking is actually key to keep this particularity, protect languages, and that's all the countries, and we come back to democracy, has still an image about their own cinema and audiovisual. Because when you are in Serbia, you have maybe 5-6 films per year. If this film cannot be funded, you have no images of yourself. And I think that's a real fight. We need to be able to tell your own stories locally with your own voice. And that's a fight.
Well, there's clearly no easy answer here. I think one thing we haven't mentioned, and you're talking about the market and the algorithms and all these things, is also emotion. And I think that's where everyone here is kind of in between. Well, you're an artist. I mean, everyone's an artist at some point. But the relationship between the artist and the audience, because to me that's the most important. Coming to Cannes, I don't know about what's happening in certain countries, and I see this film and I connect. It's because I connect with the lead, the character in the Seed of the Sacred Fig. It's because I watch everything on the news about what's happening in Iran. But when you see a small family and you relate to a character and you're feeling emotion, that's what I think fosters change and makes audiences want to defend democracy as well. And so you're kind of at all the different levels in between them. So I think that's the question. And I think the most important thing, is to have these discussions. Are you speaking with, on your level, are you getting different people together? Not necessarily just a panel in Cannes, although I'm sure this will be world changing and industry changing, but fostering the dialogue. Are you in talks with?
I'm not really sure what you asked me, but because I will just answer something now. So one thing is that I think that it's become very clear for Europe at large politically, but also for all the institutions governing public funding in Europe, that Europe has been too slow in terms of securing an infrastructure. And infrastructure is like streaming platforms, social media platforms, all this. So, and I really, really hope that is going to move much faster. I mean, we just had a meeting between the Nordic broadcasters and Nordic film funds, because the Ministry of Culture in Denmark proposed doing a Nordic streaming platform. And if you had asked that question 1 year ago, everyone would have said, never gonna happen. And now, at least there are a few voices saying, okay, but we need this to happen. So I think some things will happen now that would not have happened a year ago. Then I think there's an institutional responsibility. I come back to your premiere last year in the Grand Palais. After the film, you stood up, and I know you never said you always refused saying you make political films, but you stood up and said, now is the time to make political films. And I was like, fucking my heart was beating. And then I started looking around to see who was clapping. And already at that moment, there was a lot of self-censorship in that space. So I thought, at that time I was not the head of the institute, but of the film school, and I thought, okay, this is a job to be done. That the institutions governing public film funding in Europe really needs to be very, very brave if we want to have filmmakers reflect what happens in society now.
Right. My question was kind of, are you all talking to each other? Do you have, are you speaking to people in power? Are you speaking to, is there a dialogue between all of the different levels, all of the different countries in Europe, Europe communicating with countries like America?
Yeah,
is it happening now?
All the time.
All the time. All the time.
So we don't speak as individuals, but I speak with the people representing all these people all the time. You know, when you do lobby work, you have to understand how relevant you are to the people you speak to. Obviously, for European institutions, I don't know if that's obvious to anyone in the room, but culture is not a competence of the European Union. It's actually, it stays with member states, and there are bridges being built between these two limitations that allow for us to work our way. But there are definitely things to be thought about that are very structural about the way European politics and policies are organized that we are looking into. And believe you me, my little organization with representing 20,000 directors across the European Union is of zero interest on its own, except maybe a shine of glamour here and there. But that's it. We need to work together. If we don't, we are irrelevant to the institutions we speak to. So we do that all the time, definitely.
And with coming back to the notion of speed, I think 48 hours before the Cannes Film Festival started, the CNC sent a letter to all film funds asking them to have their ministers sign a common letter.
Oh, you're giving spoilers. There's going to be,
sorry.
I don't think it's been printed. It's either today or tomorrow. No, but
the tribute that was signed yesterday, 2 days ago.
The figure, yeah. So basically, again, you can speak about it probably. All the
anyway,
ministers.
when I saw the letter, I thought, I mean, 2 days before Cannes, come on, this is not happening. But it happened. I mean, not all ministers in Europe, but the majority of ministers in Europe signed it.
This is a good sign. I was going to end, I guess, to end. Are you optimistic for the future? We've talked about everything that's being challenged and all of the issues.
We need
that
to be optimistic, but it doesn't mean that we have to, to be silent, or we need to stand up for what we believe. We need to regroup. Absolutely. I mean, I'm in the European Producers Club. I'm in the Syndicat Producteurs des Indépendants in France. I'm in Unifrance. We all speak all together with the other countries, among producers, among other and directors, and it's an ongoing conversation, and we feel the threat is huge at the moment. So,
I'm not sure it's the right place, Rebecca, to maybe ask the Trace to do more reviews of our films, so the audience can discover what we are doing. It would be great for democracy.
So in sum, the power is really in journalists. It's up to us. Okay.
But I think we also have a little bit of what do you call it? Crisis of content, or crisis of, like, there is, again, like going back to my first point. We have to start also being honest. Yes, I can sit and criticize platforms from now to eternity, but we also, like, what do we have here? We have Denmark, who's like, okay, we want to make Danish movies, and French, we want to make French movies, and it's like, and then you go through like 3 bureaucratic layers to make a movie. I mean, that's what, like, I don't know if Germans are here, like, you guys destroyed your own film industry with this system. It's like, you want get one funding for poor German filmmaker, you have to go to Bayern, and the sound designer have to come from Köln. Like, the alternative that we are giving ourselves to Netflix is a bureaucratic hell, and we have to accept that. And we also have, like, if we are really serious, again, like, if we're really serious about we're defending democracy, why the hell do you want to, like, put the Spanish stamp and the British stamp and the Danish stamp, and it's like, this movie is made by 5 countries? Understand it politically, understand that you have to justify, for the institute and the money, but ideologically it doesn't make sense. If you think that the other part is, doing like whatever, so why are you doing a bad version of that? If you know, and I would say the part that I can also blame myself for. I don't think that on my side we are trying hard enough to get into the public debate. You know, I don't think everyone should make political movies about the latest subjects and about. That's not what I'm saying, but it's alarming to see how many Second World War movies are being made. It's alarming to be how many movies about 70s being made, and every fucking time it's the same conversation. It's about now. But I mean, if it's about now, why not now? You know? Yes. And it really is a problem. And I'm here to blame too. I mean, like the last movie I did was in 70s, you know? So no, but I think this is really important because I think there is a sort of, I can say from me and my friends and colleagues, we are challenged to understand what's going on in the world right now. And when we are challenged, we have difficult time explaining to other people, and that space is left for right-wing influencers on X. You know what I mean? And I think we should just get into the mud pool. You know, we have to do that, really.
Thank you so much. This was, I think the point is there's no easy answer, and there's a lot of passion. And I think, something that, you know, as an American in France, is that everyone, even in all levels of the industry, as long as artists are passionate, as long as the people that are supporting the artists are just as passionate, I think there is maybe some hope, some optimism for the future. So thank you very much.